It all started with a bucket of soap and a sunny Saturday. Those days when you just want to wash the sidewalk, put some silly music on your cell phone, maybe even listen to some birds singing while you scrub the cement with that hard-bristled broom that seems to have come straight from the 80s. That's all. But of course, on my street, peace is a forbidden privilege, especially when you share the same zip code with a woman obsessed with regulations. She hadn't even been in the neighborhood for 2 months, and she was already walking around with that little red hardcover notebook, probably bought especially to catalog how many millimeters other people's grass exceeded what was allowed. She called herself the guardian of community harmony, but what she really did was make life hell for people who just wanted to live. Everyone knew someone like that, but when you become a direct target, the game changes. Her problem with me started, you see, because of my soap. That's right. According to her, the smell of the liquid soap you use makes me dizzy and activates my chronic childhood migraine. I could barely reply. I was stuck in that moment of disbelief, like, is this really happening? It was coconut soap with lavender, people. It wasn't even that smelly pine soap. But for her, washing the sidewalk with ordinary soap was comparable to throwing sulfuric acid into the environment. And like anyone who faithfully believes that their opinions are more important than laws, limits, or common sense, she went beyond verbal complaints. 3 days after her olfactory crisis, I woke up and saw a scene from a bad movie. My sidewalk, the one I had washed with all my care and sweat, was covered in oil. Cooking oil, yellow, greasy, oozing out of the grooves in the concrete like a cartoon trap. It looked like 50 drumsticks had been fried on top of the concrete and left to see who would be the first to fall. At first, I thought it might be some careless garbage truck, or maybe some kid trying to make a joke. But then I remembered her forced smile, the phrase she'd thrown into the air as she passed my house the day before. I hope you'll reconsider your choices for the good of the community. You know that kind of threat that comes wrapped in fake politeness? That's right. And then came the climax. Because the universe is sometimes very good at scripting. In the late afternoon, while I was still deciding whether to clean up the oil or call the town hall, I heard a scream. One of those dry ones that only last a short time but leave an echo of shame. I went to the gate and saw the scene. The woman, yes, she herself, lying on her stomach, her legs up, and her head leaning against the post as if she were trying to get a Wi-Fi signal. She slipped pretty badly. It wasn't a normal fall, it was a Greek tragedy in 3 acts. The kind of fall that, if it had been filmed, would have become a WhatsApp group picture. My first reaction was to laugh. Seriously, I couldn't help it. It was fate repaying me with interest and monetary correction. But then, a cruel doubt struck me. Should I help? Call an ambulance? Make sure everything was all right? Of course I should, right? I'm not a psychopath. But the moment I approached her and asked if she was all right, she looked at me as if I had pushed her with my bare hands. "You did it!" she screamed, her dignity dripping away with the oil under her ass. And at that moment, my friends, I knew that woman had no limits, no pride, no shame, no filter. I tried to argue. I said it didn't make sense, that I would never throw oil on my own sidewalk because I live here. But she wasn't there to listen to logic. She was there to set up a mental court, declare herself the judge, the victim, and the prosecutor, and convict me of crimes against the community, nature, and common sense. What I didn't know that day was that that fall would only be the beginning, the turning point, because from then on, the woman who slipped on her own poison decided that I was the great villain in her narrative of justice and order. And people, she would go to any lengths to prove it. The woman became a neighborhood attraction for a week. There were even people who stopped by my house just to see where the diplomatic accident was, as one debauched neighbor called it. And with every new comment, every cross look from a resident who until then had never even said good morning, I knew that the narrative was already being born crooked. She had spread her version like an epidemic, that I had thrown oil on purpose to make her fall. According to her, It was a coldly conceived and premeditated plan, almost a domestic war crime. What I thought would pass as a passing embarrassment became the start of a persecution with the right to leaflet. Literally. 3 days after the crash, I started to find leaflets stuck in my mailbox. They were printed on sulfite paper, in that Times New Roman font that only fanatics use, saying that certain neighbors represent a danger to the safety of others, and that negligence kills. It didn't have my name on it, of course, but it did have a picture of my sidewalk. Yes, she printed a picture of my sidewalk. It became a campaign poster. At first, I laughed. Because that's what you do with the absurd, right? I laughed. But then the tickets started. Handwritten notes, left under my door, glued to my car window, stuck to the gate with masking tape. You'll pay for this. You shouldn't live here. We've already called the council. The council, in this case, was the Blessed Residents Association, that group of bored pensioners who run the neighborhood as if it were a national security company. And since she was the person who always brought a pie to the condominium meeting, not made by her, of course, bought at the bakery, the council was completely on her side. They called me to an extraordinary meeting about incidents of antisocial behavior, and I went, obviously just for the pleasure of watching the circus. I sat in a cold room, with a plastic chair and the smell of stale coffee, and waited for the welcome speech. But what came was an interrogation. A man with a white mustache and a shaky voice began reading a report that sounded like it had been written by a scriptwriter for a detective series. It spoke of silent threats and hostile behavior, and there she was, sitting at the other end of the room, wearing a fake neck brace and looking like a soap opera martyr. A woman who had slipped in oil that, according to herself, had mysteriously appeared on my sidewalk, and who now walked around with her neck locked as if she had just come out of a Formula One accident. What's worse, she made a point of sighing every 2 minutes, a dramatic, calculated sigh to remind everyone that there was a victim there. I wanted to applaud the performance. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to stay calm. I explained that I would never pour oil there, not least because my garage was right on that stretch of sidewalk. I questioned whether anyone really thought that I, in good conscience, would put a death trap on my doorstep. One of the council members even shook his head as if in agreement. But she, of course, didn't let it go. She interrupted my talk by saying that psychopaths often live next door and act like lambs. At that point, if I'd had an audience, I would have been applauded. The woman was convinced that she had found the serial killer of Ipes Street. I left there angrier than I entered, but also with a strange feeling, a mixture of disbelief and helplessness, because as ridiculous as it all was, it was messing with my real life. I began to notice that some neighbors avoided looking me in the eye. Others would change the sidewalk when they saw me coming in the opposite direction. There was one who even slowed down when he saw me coming out to walk, as if I was going to pull a gallon of oil out of my backpack at any moment. My name wasn't on the flyer, but it was on people's lips. And what about her? Well, she was enjoying herself. She walked past my house with a slow, pained gait, wearing a sling that nobody knew where it came from, even though she had fallen on her back. And when she crossed paths with me, she gave that cynical half-smile and a slight shake of the head, as if to say, "I see you, criminal." It gradually ate away at me. I, who had never interfered in anyone's life, who had always been the discreet neighbor who said good morning and paid the taxes on time, became the target of a personal crusade by the most insufferable woman who had ever set foot in that neighborhood. But the climax was yet to come. Because, you see, she wasn't content with being a victim. She wanted punishment, justice, a spectacle. So she decided to go one step further. She filed a police report. Yes, that's right. She went to the town's police station, with the cleanest face in the world, and said that I had tried to cause a serious accident for ideological reasons. The police report said that there had been a history of friction between us, which was a lie, since she had basically created this conflict on her own, and that I had openly stated that people like her didn't deserve to live in that neighborhood. The deputy who called me to ask about it seemed more embarrassed than I was. She said it was protocol, that she needed to hear me out, that she understood how some situations get out of hand. I thanked her for her civility, went over there and gave my version of the facts. But it was at that moment, in that white room with the smell of moldy paper, that I realized it wasn't going to stop there. She had turned her fall into a crusade, and I had unwittingly become the heretic of the day. The woman who had fallen into her own oil now wanted to see my world slip away with her. And if it were up to her, she would. Because this was no longer about a fall, or soap, or a sidewalk. It was about power, about control, about turning any little thing into a moral battlefield. And without asking, I was summoned to war. After the OR, I officially became the most suspicious citizen in the neighborhood. I started to notice small details that hadn't caught my attention before. Children who used to play ball near my garage now chose another block. People who used to ask for plumber referrals in the street group started exchanging messages outside, without tagging me. There was a neighbor who crossed the street at the market when she saw me entering the canned goods aisle, all because a woman slipped up at the theater and decided I was the villain of the season. But if I thought rock bottom was being treated like a sociopath by a group of adults who use the word assembly more often than good morning, I was wrong. The thing still had a whole cellar to go down, and she was willing to dig. First came the requests. Yes, formal requests, printed on the Residents Association's letterhead, asking me to present a technical report on the composition of the products used to clean the sidewalk, along with a formal apology to the community for the high-risk incident. I read that with the look on my face of someone who thought they'd been fined for breathing wrong. Who signs an apology for throwing washing soap on a concrete floor? What about a technical report? I buy soap at the market, in the fabric softener aisle, not at a nuclear power plant. I ignored it, of course, and like any good residential street autocrat, she didn't like being ignored. She started taking photos of my house more often, stopped at the gate with a clipboard, wrote things down, measured my fence with a portable tape measure. I began to wonder if she was trying to evict me or renovate the facade by remote control. The last straw, however, was when they came to install a community security camera right in front of my house. And no, it wasn't one of those small, discreet cameras. It was a gray thing with an antenna, a lens that looked like a telescope, and a sign underneath that read, "Intensive Surveillance Zone. Area under constant monitoring for collective security reasons." Collective security from what? A guy with a broom and soap? I went to get some satisfaction, obviously. I knocked on the door of the association's headquarters, which, for some reason, was also the treasurer's garage, and asked to speak to whoever had approved it. They sent me straight to her, of course, who showed up wearing a T-shirt with the phrase, "Order is progress," and a smile like someone who had already rehearsed her speech in the mirror. She welcomed me with that sweet tone that only aggressive people know how to use. "Oh, you must be talking about the security camera, right? I'm glad you came to see us. We're all very concerned about recent events. Your street has unfortunately been classified as a sensitive area." I almost choked on my audacity. Sensitive? Because of a fall? Is there a camera on anyone else's gate? I asked, trying not to shout. She pretended to think, like someone doing a complicated calculation, and replied, "Not yet, but we're looking into expanding the program, of course." In other words, only I was being watched, because only I was the problem. I went home feeling like a character from a reality TV show. My every move now had an audience. I'd step into the yard and already feel the electronic eye analyzing me as if I were about to commit an environmental crime. I even began to suspect pigeons, because, anything was possible with her. And she followed the script perfectly. She would cycle down the street pretending to be exercising, but would slow down in front of my house, always looking at the camera, as if to say, "I'm watching." It was like a parody of her own obsession. I kept waiting for her to appear with a megaphone to narrate my routine, Attention! He's washing the sidewalk again. Red codes in action. As the weeks went by, my patience was slowly ground down like hamburger meat. Because you can even laugh at the first onslaughts. I laughed at the woman with the fake necklace. I laughed at the flyers. I even laughed at the tickets. But after 3 months of being treated as a public menace for washing the sidewalk, even the most zen of Tibetan monks would begin to doubt his own sanity. I even considered hiring a lawyer, not because I thought I'd be arrested, but because someone needed to put a limit on that woman before she decided to install a retinal scanner at the entrance to the neighborhood. I got in touch with a law firm that specializes in cases of abuse of power in residential associations. And yes, there is such a thing, and made an appointment. The lawyer listened to everything with the impassive face of someone who has dealt with a lot of crazy people. When I finished, he gave a short laugh and said, "You're not the first, nor will you be the last. But I can assure you of one thing. These types of people only understand one language, the language of the process." And look, hearing that gave me an almost illicit pleasure. I prepared all the documentation. I gathered the photos from the cameras, the notes, the pamphlets, the recording of the council meeting. Yes, I recorded it. Even the fake medical report she tried to use at the police station. I put together a dossier that would make any investigative newspaper envious, and I sent it all. But before the process even got underway, something unexpected happened. Maybe the universe took pity, maybe it was just cosmic irony, but out of the blue, the camera installed in front of my house was removed. Without warning, without justification. It was gone. All that was left was the crooked bracket on the wall, like the stump of a retired robot's arm. I thought it was a mistake, but then I discovered that she herself had asked for it to be taken down, and not because she realized she'd overdone it, but because the camera had recorded something she didn't want anyone to see. And my friend, that's when the tide started to turn. I could pretend to be surprised by what happened next, but the truth is that the only thing that really shocked me was how much courage she had. Because to do what she did, you need a lot of audacity, the kind that goes beyond the limit of stubbornness and straight into the territory of delirium. The camera, that metal freak she had installed pointing directly at my gate, was removed on a Monday morning. No warning letter, no notice from the association, nothing. It just disappeared. And since every gossip in the neighborhood was already hooked on the free entertainment the woman provided, someone soon came to tell me what happened. Apparently, the camera had captured something she didn't want anyone to see, and that something ended up falling into the lap of the one person she wanted to destroy. Me. Here's what happened. A week before the camera went missing, the condo's janitor, a forgetful but nice guy, was doing his nightly rounds when he saw a strange movement on my sidewalk. But he didn't say anything. Not to me, not to anyone. He recorded it on his cell phone, kept it, and kept to himself. But when he found out that the camera had been removed in an emergency and without approval, he decided to check the history. And there, among the images of my quiet routine of opening the door to pick up deliveries and water plants, was it. Not slipping, not tripping, but yes, pouring oil on my sidewalk. With a 2-liter bottle in her hand, yellow gloves up to her elbows, and an expression that looked like it had come straight out of a fifth-rate spy movie. She did this in the early hours of the morning, with a flashlight stuck to her forehead, like a frustrated miner. The oil dripped as she moved around like someone fertilizing a garden of discord. And the most beautiful detail? She tripped over her own slipper and almost fell over before she could complete the job. The janitor came up to me with a USB stick in his hand, and the following phrase, "I think you'll like this." I watched the video 4 times in a row. The first time, I was in shock. The second time, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. The third time, I started thinking about all the newsletters, meetings, flyers, and vigilantes. And on the fourth, I felt like applauding. Because that woman outdid herself. She really believed she could manipulate everything and everyone with impunity. She just didn't count on the irony of fate, being caught by the very surveillance she had set up. I took the video straight to the lawyer. He watched it quietly, with the restrained smile of someone who has just seen a defendant dig his own grave. "This is worth gold," he said. And it was. The lawsuit was filed the next day with everything attached: the video, the tickets, the photos of the leafleting, even the ridiculous police report she had filed against me. That's when the truth started to sink in for her. For the first time, the woman appeared on the street without her neck brace, without the pose, without even that usual cynical smile. She seemed to have shrunk, as if she had finally realized that the tables had turned, and a good one. Rumors began to circulate that she was trying to convince the board to dissolve the association before the scandal broke. She wanted to erase everything, like someone who pulls the plug thinking it will make the computer forget the saved files. But it was too late. The video was posted on the residents group's network by one of the council members who couldn't stand her show any longer. The title of the video? Mission Impossible Oil. The neighborhood laughed. They laughed a lot. Some people had mugs made with a print of her pouring the oil. She tried to deny it. She tried to say that the video had been doctored. Then she said she was applying eucalyptus essential oil to purify the sidewalk. She said it was part of an energy cleansing ritual, and that people were distorting their spirituality. But nobody bought it. Not even the lawyer she hired in a hurry to try to hush up the case. Because this was no longer just a conflict between neighbors, it was clear proof that she had played the victim to ruin someone. And she left it all on tape. The association was dismantled in 2 days. The remaining board members resigned in a row, ashamed of having been part of that circus. Some even came to me to apologize in person. One of them brought me an apple pie and said he hoped it would help. I thanked him, of course, but I confess I wanted him to eat the pie with cooking oil to taste the irony. And her? Well, she's gone. Literally. She took her suitcases, the hysterical dog that kept barking into the wind and left in the middle of the night. Some say she went to live with a sister in a neighboring town. Others say she went on a spiritual retreat to reconnect with her inner self. The last time I saw any news of her was a vague Facebook post about negative energies and life's betrayals. She didn't even mention the epic slip. She pretended it never happened. Classic. The lawsuit went ahead. My lawyer is taking care of everything, and by the looks of things, she's going to have to pay me a lot of compensation. Not for the oil, not for the neck brace, but for the psychological hell she put me through for months because of a coconut soap with lavender, for the smear campaign, the cameras, the flyers, and all the theater. Today, my sidewalk is clean, literally and figuratively. I can wash it without fear of retaliation or mystical persecution. The janitor has become my friend. The neighborhood has greeted me again. And the camera? Well, it's been reinstalled, but now it's pointed at the street, as it should have been from the start. Real security, not surveillance disguised as revenge. From all this, I've learned only one thing. Never underestimate someone who says they just want peace, because the person who just wants peace, when pushed to the limit, becomes exactly what the other person fears. I became the guy who brought down the drama queen, and it took nothing but patience, a little coconut soap, and a camera pointed at the right time. And if you liked this video, don't forget to leave your like and opinion in the comments below.